I here almost 24 years ago, I introduced a custom, a tradition on Slichot on the Saturday night immediately preceding Rosh Hashanah, and that is to show a movie. Why a movie? It would just seem like a fun thing to do, but it had to be a movie with a message, a movie that may have had a moral dilemma, in which sometimes the heroes and the so-called villains are, it would be hard to distinguish one from the other. There would be shades of gray, and we would discuss. There would be some issue, something that we could discuss following the movie, and then we would move on to our Selichot service. We'd also serve apple desserts. I wish we were meeting. I wish we were meeting in person tonight. Hopefully, God willing, next year we'll meet together, and I will serve a lot of apple desserts. Well, we're very fortunate to have Hanan Harchol with us tonight. Rachel and I were just discussing what we were going to do for Slichot. It was very impractical to show a movie, a full length movie, an hour and 20 minutes or whatever. And we, I have used in the past some of the animations by Hanan Harchol. They are brilliant. They're 10 minutes long, a lot of them brilliantly illustrated, and each one is thought provoking. And we contacted Hanan, and he graciously agreed to be with us for a Q&A and having a little schmooze session with me following the viewing of a particular animation that he did. Let me just give you a quick um, biography of our guest tonight. Hanan is a New York-based uh, teacher, a filmmaker. He's an animator, an artist, a classical guitarist. Uh, he was born on Kibbutz Kinneret in Israel, and he moved to the United States when he was 2 years old. He recently um, released his first dramatic film. It's entitled About a Teacher. It's a semi-autobiographical narrative which he wrote, directed, and produced, and it's based on his experience teaching filmmaking to inner city public high school students. It garnered 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and critics are raving. The film is currently available on Amazon Prime. Oh, I get it. I'm gonna look at it, Hanan. I have Amazon Prime on my TV. You can get it in the United States. It's also on Vimeo on demand worldwide. His animations have been broadcast on Channel 13 and at over 100 film festivals nationwide. His animations, drawings, and paintings were subject of a solo catalog museum exhibition at the Hebrew Union College Museum in New York, which subsequently traveled around the country. Hanan's animated series, Jewish Food for Thought, which is generously funded by the Covenant Foundation. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Um, Teaches Jewish ethics through thought-provoking animated conversations between Hanan and his Israeli parents, and it is used as an educational resource by countless schools and synagogues across the country. He was featured on websites ranging from NPR's On Being. I listen to that every Sunday morning. Kristen Tippett,
Krista
she's
Tippett.
wonderful. Yeah, she's wonderful. And the UJR broadcasts some of his works as well, and Aish.com as well. So you can see he's got fans in the Orthodox community, the Reformed community, and everything in between. He's a classical guitarist who has broadcast solo recitals on QXR in New York and has recorded 11 best-selling CDs. He lives in Manhattan with his wife and 2 sons. So we are honored to have you with us, Hanan. And, so when we were looking for something appropriate for tonight, we said it had to be your work. Okay.
I want to thank you so much. The privilege is really mine. And thank you, Rabbi Tuffs, for having me, and Rachel for facilitating everything, and Cantor Silver. And it's a real honor to present my work to your congregation. And I want to also specifically thank the Covenant Foundation, because not only are they the ones that fund the animations, but they're the ones who are responsible for my entire Jewish journey that led to the making of these animations. So there's nothing that pleases me more than to see my work being used as Selichot Services, and it's a real privilege. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's show this beautiful animation. It's called The Landlord, or just Landlord.
Yeah, and it's Landlord, and it's part of a two-part, 2 animations that are geared for Yom Kippur. And I guess the one thing when you watch the animations, for the people watching it, if there's any line that either the father or the son says that resonates with you for whatever reason, just jot that down so that you can bring it up later in discussion. And the other thing that I encourage you to do is, after the animation, to please watch the credits. The reason is, there are more than 100 Jewish teachings in this animation, and the wisdom doesn't come from me. I'm just the facilitator. The wisdom comes from tons and tons of rabbis and scholars and Jewish texts that I'm studying. So I really want to give honor to the teachers who are the ones giving me this wisdom. So please watch the credits at the end. I'm sharing the screen now, and share computer sound. And here we go.
We've been driving for 10 minutes. You haven't said a word. What happened? Nothing. Let me guess. You finally realized that you're losing your hair. What? No, it's just thinning. Ah, as my father used to say, thinning is just the beginning. Stop. It's not my hair, Daddy. I'm just a little upset because I got a text from David. David from school? You haven't mentioned him in a long time. Almost 2 years and counting. Remember that animation job I applied to when I moved to New York? The one you didn't get. That was years ago. Who cares about that now? Soon after I got the rejection letter, I found out that David got the position. So, I guess he was a better candidate. He didn't know about the position until I told him about it. What do you mean? I had asked him to be one of my references. What? And somehow his reference letter ended up getting lost in the mail, and he applied for the job himself. Unbelievable. What the schmendrick? I told him I couldn't believe what he did, that he totally screwed me over, and I hung up the phone. And that was 2 years ago. What the schmendrick? Every time I think about it, every time I hear his name, I get angry. And now he texts me after 2 years wanting to get together, to apologize. So, what do you think I should do? Forgive him. What? Did you hear anything I just told you? Every single word. I heard exactly what you said. But you said yourself he's a schmendrick. He is. And you asked for advice on what you should do. And I gave it to you. Forgive him. Well, the last thing I'm going to do is to forgive him. That's your choice. But remember that someday when you're asking for forgiveness, whether you want to be judged the way you're judging him, what he did is unforgivable. There are very few things that are unforgivable, Hanan. And that's not one of them. I could kill David for what he did. That's one thing that's unforgivable. What? If you kill someone, even a schmendrick, maybe you might even want forgiveness for killing the schmendrick. But you can't get it anymore, because the only person that can forgive you is dead, because you killed him. What? I'm not literally going to kill the guy, Daddy. It's just a figure of speech. What I'm trying to say is that I absolutely cannot forgive him. You mean you won't forgive him? Daddy, don't twist this around and make it about me. Who else is it about? Well, him, obviously. What he did. Why are you defending what he did? I would never defend what David did. It was terrible. But I'm not talking about what he did. I'm talking about what you can do. I'm not going to let him walk all over me. Forgiving him doesn't mean you're approving of what he did. It just means that you forgive him. Why would I ever want to forgive him? He's probably just apologizing to get rid of his guilt. Does it really matter why he's apologizing? If I let him get away with this, he'll be laughing behind my back. I'll lose all self-respect. How is your self-respect connected to what he did or does? If people heard I forgave David, they'll think I'm the Schmendrick. When are we going to talk about you? I thought that's what we've been doing. First you're worried about him laughing at you, then you're worried about what other people think of you. That's not you. That's your ego. Whatever. Even if I were to forgive him hypothetically, I would still be angry with him. Well, that's not really forgiving him then. What do you mean? If I forgive him, I forgive him. That's maybe how it works when you give a homeless guy on the street $1. Even if you don't really want to give him the $1, you still gave him the $1 and helped out a homeless guy. But that's not how forgiveness works. You have to really mean it. And if you're still angry, then you can't mean it. I just hope he's paying you the rent. Paying me? He stole from me. He's not paying me anything. What rent? What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that he's living inside your head. He's obviously taking up a lot of rooms there. I mean, when did this happen? 2 years ago? And you're still talking about him? So, how much is he paying you? Living in my head, rent-free. I never thought about it that way. It's just, I can't let it go. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. What do you mean? Now we're finally talking about you. I'm just still so angry. Listen, Hanan, when someone does something that hurts us, it's natural to get angry. It's a reflex, an instinct. We can't help that. Back when I found out what he did, I wanted to punch him in the face. But you see, you didn't. You didn't punch him in the face. Well, obviously. There are consequences. I could go to jail. I'm not an animal. I don't just let any urge that comes up control me. Exactly. Human beings are not animals because we have a choice. We always have a choice, Hanan. After controlling yourself by not punching him, you've unfortunately remained angry and created a jail in your head where a Schmendrick is living rent-free. At this point, it seems like maybe punching him and going to jail would have been simpler. But I can't help my anger. It's like you said before, it's a reflex. You need to listen more carefully, Hanan. When you first found out that David got the job, you felt angry. That was a reflex. Most people can't control that. I got angry when I heard about it too. But how long you hung on to the anger, that's your choice. You mean resentment. If you want to use fancy schmancy words to impress the women, yes, resentment. But anger is still a part of resentment, and I can't control a feeling. But you're the one that's recreating the anger by constantly opening up the wound again and again. If you have the power to control your reaction by not punching him, then you also can control your actions here. So you're saying stop replaying what happened 2 years ago in my head. I'm saying more than that. I'm saying that actions lead to feelings. Stopping an action is not the same as taking an action. To free yourself from the resentment, you need to take action. What action could I possibly take to free myself from my resentment? Forgive. But then he wins. Does he really win? What does he win? He gets away with it. He got to take advantage of me and he knows it. It makes me so angry. I want revenge. I want him to suffer. How will his suffering help you? Justice has been served. But how does that help you? Does that improve your life? I'm not sure, but it feels good. But wouldn't it have also felt good in the moment to punch him in the face? Yes, but I would have been responsible for that. And being happy at his suffering doesn't make me responsible for it. Maybe not. But it pulls you into a very dark place. By becoming someone who is filled with revenge, it becomes a kind of jail itself that's very hard to get out of. Hanan, you're young and you feel like life will never end. But I'm older, and eventually you will realize that we have a finite amount of time. And in the end, all we really have is what we make of our life. The choices we make and the actions that we take. How we treat other people and how we treat ourselves. At the end, it's up to each of us as individuals. I don't know if I want to forgive him. You don't have to forgive Hanan, but it's good to forgive. Forgiving, and this is very important, so try to remember it. Forgiving is letting go of resentment. It's accepting all of the parts of you and another person, the good and the bad. Not condoning them, but accepting them. You can choose that the person you want to be in this world is one who resents or one who forgives. Realize that you are free to choose. It's your choice. But my advice to you is find a way to choose forgiveness. But what about David? Isn't he responsible for his actions and choices? If David chose to act like a shmendrik, that was his choice. You don't have to approve, you don't have to like it, but it was still his choice and you have no control over him. At the end, what you have is a freedom to choose how you behave. And now he wants your forgiveness. It's really hard to be forgiving. It's the most difficult thing to do. That's why the reward is so great. But think, Hanan, haven't you ever done bad things that you've wanted forgiveness for? Haven't we all? Of course, it's part of being human. We all make mistakes, but we always want other people to forgive us, while the key is learning to forgive others. When you think about how to respond to David, try and think about how you hope to be treated when you are apologizing for your mistakes. What are you doing? Texting David back. What did you write? Let's meet at 6 for coffee at Elmo's. I signed it, your former landlord. See?
So many scholars.
So at this point, we have two sons. So this animation was done a while back. Thank you for watching. I'll stop the share. And I think I'm back, right? Great.
Yeah.
Yes, you're back.
Well, I love it. I've seen it a few times, and I think it's brilliant. Oh, I'm gonna just throw some questions at you, and anyone watching on our YouTube or our Facebook or live streaming, please get your questions to Rachel. Is your dad said, it's the hardest thing to do is to forgive. It is really a difficult thing. Are there levels of forgiveness? I mean, is forgiveness a process, or can you forgive someone totally right away, or is it a gradual process that you begin and it might unfold over a period of time?
So I think you're asking a very profound question, Rabbi. And the first part of the answer is that Rabbi Abraham Twersky, and he was credited a lot in the end as well, talked about these 3 stages of anger. When somebody offends you, when somebody does something wrong, there's this initial instinctive reaction where you're upset. And then the second stage is how you actually react to that. Do you blow up at them? Do you punch them in the face? Do you walk away? That's the reaction. But the third stage, which is the hardest one, is how long do you actually hang on to this anger? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, I presented this animation 2 days ago, and somebody brought up, what about the case of something that is unforgivable? And of course, in Judaism, there are specific things that are unforgivable, like murder, because in Judaism, you have to be forgiven by the person who you committed the crime against. So if you commit murder, they're no longer there and they can't forgive you. But they were saying, no, what about something horrific, like abuse or incest? Something really, really horrific where something has really scarred you for life. Are Are you expected to forgive the person? How do you do this? And the answer was very complicated. So I'm just going to touch upon it, but we could easily spend the hour just on that question. But the gist of this is that the first step is really to be able to let go of this anger. And the reason is because that anger, that hurt, that pain is continuing to inflict a cost on you for holding it. So, you know, if a person, God forbid, was raped, it's not even the experience of the rape, as horrific as it is, then the constant regurgitating it over and over again in one's head means that you're allowing that to end up inflicting this pain on you over and over and over and over again. So there's a continuing personal cost to it. So if you are going to talk about stages, I would say that the first stage is finding a way to stop re-inflicting that trauma over and over again.
Yeah. There are some things that are kind of unforgivable, but I guess that too is relative and personal. There's a person in our congregation who survived the Holocaust and who is forgiven. You know, I don't forgiven, even though her family and she suffered a great deal. And she says, she'll say exactly what you've said. You know, she just had to go on, and it was inflicting a greater cost on her, and then giving her then whatever benefit she thought she might be deriving from being so angry. Are there, Rachel, any questions that you'd like to field?
So I've just had some comments from folks so far. Dee said, Sharon says she agrees. And Dee says, hold on one moment, that she loves forgiveness is letting go of resentment, that's very powerful. And Sharon's also so happy for this wonderful Selichot program.
Well, thank you. You know, I want to, if I can, Rabbi, just very briefly talk about my journey of how I started making these animations, because this is kind of fundamental to all of this. And then I would like to also address this idea of the Holocaust and forgiveness. And so just quickly, my journey is that I was born in Israel, but I was not raised in any kind of observant way. As a matter of fact, the kibbutz where I was born was really anti-religious. But then after my parents, we moved to the United States when I was 2 years old. But after my parents got divorced when I was 11, my mom started taking my sister and me to once a year to an Erev Yom Kippur service. And I went because I figured I was hedging my bets, you know, who knows. And we also went once a year to Seder, which I enjoyed very much. And it was at a very observant home. But I was what's known as a twice-a-year Jew. That's what they call it. I knew I was Jewish, but it wasn't connected to anything meaningful. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because in the Yom Kippur services, there was all of this thing, you know, I'm reading all of the bad things that I did and doing this and thinking, wow, my therapist would really think this is not a very positive experience. And forgiveness was this kind of thing. Well, if someone has apologized 3 times, and if you're not forgiving them, then the onus is on you and you're not written in the book of life. And I'm like, oh my God, it was not connecting with me. And then what happened is that at age 39, I started participating in this project. I was invited to participate in this project funded by the Covenant Foundation, where 14 artists each took on a section of the Passover Haggadah and made a short video that represented that section. And I made a short animation about Maror, where my father's eating horseradish and talking about the importance of bitter herbs. That was the first time where I started reading Torah, because part of that project was that you had to meet once a month with a rabbi for a Jewish text study. And in that text study, the conversation was all about the human condition and philosophy and psychology. I said, that's not Judaism. Judaism are all the things that I did wrong. But I was reading these Jewish texts and the conversation was so enlightening that I said, well, let me read the Torah and let me read Exodus for the first time. And what I was particularly fascinated about were the conversations under the text between the rabbis where they're arguing back and forth. And it reminded me of my family. And I started seeing all of this wisdom. And I approached the Covenant Foundation. I said, what if I could take the wisdom out of the texts and make it accessible to people who know they're Jewish, but they're not observant? And that's how the project came to be. Why am I mentioning this history? Is because in my studies, I found out two things right away, that there was a paradox in Judaism. So in Yom Kippur, right, we talk about apology, right? Apologizing for the things that you've done wrong, and also forgiving. We're basically talking essentially about those two things, and maybe tzedakah, right? So to me, making a mistake, apologizing for something that I did wrong, making a mistake for me was always considered horrible. Mistakes were nothing but horrible, right? I would come home with a 99 on a test, and both my parents would be like, 99, good. What was the question you got wrong? Everything was about mistakes were bad, and everything is about perfectionism. And suddenly I'm learning from my Jewish teachers that mistakes are good. What? Mistakes are good? What do you mean mistakes are good, right? Or beating the chest. What do you mean mistakes are good? What? Mistakes are good because we're not made as angels. We're made as human beings, and it is human to make mistakes. Now, the question is, once you've made the mistake, that's human. But what are you going to do about that mistake? Are you going to recognize the mistake? Are you going to have the courage to apologize for that mistake? And then, this is the hardest thing, right? Are you going to try to fix what you broke? And even the hardest, Rambam, has these stages. The hardest thing, are you going to look in yourself and say, okay, I made the mistake. That's human. It's okay. But this mistake has given me an opportunity to look in myself and say, what inside of me led me to that mistake? And I'm going to improve that, right? Angels are perfect, but human beings have the ability to improve. So every mistake now suddenly is good because it's an opportunity to look in ourselves and improve. Same thing with forgiveness, right? You would think the person harmed you, right? The person took something away from you. The person screwed you over, and now you're going to give them something? But this is, again, this paradox of Judaism, is that in giving them this forgiveness, like that woman that you were saying, the Holocaust survivor, in giving this forgiveness, you also at the same time free yourself. And this is this thing that I constantly found in these studies, is that Judaism shows me that the way that I've been going all along, mistakes are bad. Everything in Judaism actually points to exactly the opposite. You find power in humility. All of these paradoxes in Judaism, and that's what I wanted to share. And finally, what I'll say about the Holocaust. My mother lost more than half her family in the Holocaust. And what I've quickly learned is that the Holocaust is simply one of those topics that can't be talked about in that way. I simply cannot impose upon anybody, not only on whom to forgive or whom not, but the Holocaust is just such a sensitive topic to so many people that I would never dare to impose my views on what someone should or shouldn't do with the Holocaust. But I will say there's a lot in that. What that woman said is that she needed to move on. And for her, she found that the best way to do that was to forgive.
John Lewis, we just lost a great hero in American life. He was once visited in his congressional office by a former member of the Ku Klux Klan who had personally beat him.
Wow.
And the man came to ask John Lewis for forgiveness. And John Lewis said, I forgive you.
Wow.
And hugged him. Now, the advantage there is the man showed remorse.
Yeah.
And it's easier, I think, to forgive someone who sincerely feels remorse. David in your story seems to have felt a measure of remorse.
Yeah, not in the original version. That's interesting that you're saying that because in the original version, I made up the story about David. Many of the stories in the animations are true, but I made up the story about David.
Yeah.
And in the original story that I made up, David wasn't even asking for an apology. And my father was still saying to forgive.
Yeah, that's
and
even a tough one.
Yeah, one of the rabbis said to me, Hanan, you're going to lose people. Like, at least have them apologize because you're asking Hanan to be a tzaddik.
You know, in the Talmud, you have a case and you go and you think you've solved it, and someone says, "But let's put another spin on it." The person, there are two cases here. There's not one case, but two cases. Forgiving someone who is remorseful, someone who has apologized, and forgiving someone who hasn't apologized. I think what you're telling us, the wisdom that you're saying is, in either case, forgive them.
And there's a reason why. There's also a Jewish reason why. This is very meaningful to me. I'm not observant. I'm going to participate in I have my kippah now, and I'm going to participate in the services afterwards. But I'm not observant. But I've really what I've learned has touched me very, very deeply. So I'm going to go back to Genesis, to Bereshit, and okay. this idea that basically, the one thing that we have, and I asked a rabbi once, I put it in one of my animations and said, can I really say this? It almost sounds too intense. He thought about it for a while and he's like, yes, you can. The one thing that we have, the only thing we truly have is choice, right? We have free will. And this is something that, I spent thousands of dollars on therapy, right, to learn, but it's in the Torah, right? I cannot control another person's actions. I cannot control whether they're going to be remorseful. I can't control whether they're going to continue to be a schmuck or a schmendrick. I have no control over other people. Mm-hmm. But what I do have control over, what I do have free will over, this is very profound. It sounds so simple, but it's very profound.
Yes.
What I do have free will, free choice over are my own actions. And Judaism is fundamentally, mainly about actions, right? Notice, before we go to God, we have to go to the person who has wronged us or we've wronged and try to make some kind of peace with them, at least make an attempt. So we have control over our own actions. So if someone has violated us in even the most horrific way, and even if they don't feel remorse, what the only thing we do have control over is our own actions. And there is a lot in our own actions. If we choose wholeheartedly to say, I'm going to forgive you so that I can now put this behind me.
Is forgiveness something, is forgiveness about words or it's about actions? If it's about something more than words, what actions do you take in the process of forgiveness?
Right. So I will.
So I can say I forgive you, but
exactly.
Is that an action? Is that an action of itself?
I've had these presentations sometimes at Limud conferences where there might be 100 people in the audience or 200 people in the audience, right? And somebody starts off saying, telling a personal story. Usually it's, very interactive. So people tell, this person did this and this and this to me or whatever. And we talk about it. And then sometimes what happens is the audience member will say, you know what, fine, I forgive him. I forgive him, fine. I forgive him, fine. Right?
Yeah.
And you can tell.
I forgive him.
Yeah, you can tell that the person is still angry. So they've forgiven him, quote unquote. They've said the words, quote unquote.
Yes.
But they haven't really let go of the resentment. So that agonizing thing that's eating away at them is still there. I guess the way I define action is that you take whatever steps you feel are necessary to get over it. I'll give you a very strange example. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you'll see when you watch a lot of my animations, they seem to be about different topics. But the more you watch them, and you have to watch the animations more than once, like in this animation, there are more than 100 Jewish teachings. Every time I watch it, I notice another teaching, right? Yeah. So, and I wrote the thing, right? It's because the wisdom is very rich. So in the animation that I made on chesed, which is very much related to this animation, I made an animation on kindness. You're just typing, you do Jewish and kindness or Jewish and chesed. And it's one of the first things that come up. All the animations are free, by the way. So in the animation on chesed, we're talking about kindness. And one of the exercises that I give people is I say, think about somebody who you really can't stand. I don't know, a boss or a supervisor, somebody who like really irritates you every day. And then I say, and just do this, just try it. Bake them cookies. Now, I don't mean buy them cookies. I say, go and bake them cookies, like chocolate chip, bake it from scratch.
Interesting.
And then ideally even, give them the cookies, ideally even anonymously, just even leave them the cookies. And just try it and then see how you feel after doing that. You would be very surprised. You'd be very surprised if instead of cursing them out or complaining about them, being irritated about them, you just bake them cookies and you leave them the cookies. See how you feel afterwards. It's this bizarre thing. But what happens is when you extend, when you actually do an act of kindness, when you actually do something for somebody, it gives you back twofold, tenfold, 20-fold. It's been studied in business, by the way. It's all something scientific, it's psychological. They've written books about it. I can refer you to Oprah or I can refer you to the Talmud. It's true. It really is true. This is not some kind of voodoo. It has to do with the fact that when you're constantly feeding yourself again and again and again, this horrific message, what ends up happening is you then put yourself inside a prison of very, very dark thoughts. And you might say, yeah, but it's because of them. But who's continuing that voice inside of your head?
Listen, I've been in therapy like you have, and in looking at my feelings and trying to change my inner life. But that's not a very Jewish approach. The Talmud says, do something even if you don't feel it. Lo lishma balishma. I don't know if you've come across that teaching.
Yeah.
Do it, do something.
Yes.
Do the right thing. Even if your heart isn't in it, your feelings will follow. That's what mitzvot are about. You don't wait until your heart moves you to do tzedakah. It's obligatory. You do it. And
oh, you just froze.
And your feelings will catch up with you. I had many, many years ago, a congregant came to me. His father had died, and his father had not been a very responsible man. His father had gambled away all of the money had been put aside for this man's college. He never got a chance to go to college. The man deserted his mother. So anyway, the father died destitute. And we happen to own a cemetery. We're the only synagogue in South Florida. Well, there's one other one that owns, but we own and operate our own cemetery. And he came to me, and there was nobody else to bury his father. And there was an expense involved. And he said, I don't want to do it. I don't want to even go to the expense of doing it. I don't have a lot of money because of what this man did to me, blah, 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 blah. And I convinced them. I said, you know what? You really should. You need to bury your father. Does he deserve it? Maybe, maybe not. But you need to bury your father. I said it in a sense. You might be a better man than your father was. I mean, and by doing that, you can let go. Because you will know that and so we found an inexpensive way. And when I gave the eulogy, I didn't gild the lily. I didn't say things that were patently untrue. Sort of danced around some of the facts. But I said, you need to do something to be free from your father.
I think that that's very wise. And I think that your referral to even, when Moses comes with the commandments, the Israelites say, Naseh v'nishma, right? We will do.
Absolutely.
We will do, and then we will hear or listen or understand or internalize. And in Judaism, it all is about that the action and that the kavanah, the internal intention, will come through the actions. It's kind of like what you refer in modern language to, you fake it until you make it, right?
Yes,
you do it,
absolutely.
You do
That's
it,
a very
and then
Jewish
you'll
way.
feel. But what I will say is that even that act of baking cookies, it's an act, and you're going through that act, and then maybe what happens is that it starts to change your frame of mind, and the internal situation will change. What I will say about Judaism is that I found that there are I guess kind of two lines. There's some teachers, that are more the yeshivot kind of. I forgot what the official term is. And then there are other teachers that have more kind of a Hasidic kind of bent. And in the Hasidic lines, the Hasidic teachers do deal a lot more with kind of the internal state. But regardless, absolutely, in terms of Jewish law, the actions are very, very important.
In my spiritual practice, Hanan, I meditate. And I have people meditate with me online during the week in the morning. And people say, I can't control my feelings. I can't control my thoughts. Well, you can control your thoughts. Well, you don't exactly control them, but with a meditative practice, maybe a certain prayer, tefillot, might help you. But I do know in the meditative tradition, and there is a meditative tradition within Chassidut, at least you get a certain distance and a certain detachment, a compassionate detachment from your feelings, and you can look at them, and you can with you can. It's a spiritual discipline, but you can choose what you're going to think about. It doesn't. Thoughts will come into your mind all of the time, but you can say, you know what? I'm not. Takes practice. Takes a lot of work, but you can get to the point where you can say, you know what? I'm not thinking about that now, and emotions grow out of thoughts. If you have a strong emotion, usually it starts with a thought. If I think of some wrong that's been done to me, I will have that. It's a physical reaction in my stomach, whatever. My shoulders get tight. I clench my fists. But it starts with a thought, and it becomes an emotion. But there are ways. It's in spiritual practice. I'm not getting into whether you got to believe in God. I'm not going to get into. It's a spiritual practice that that can be very beneficial.
That's meditative. That's absolutely true. I guess I just finished my script on tzedakah, and I studied now tzedakah very intensively with many people, and it's marvelous. And maybe next year I can present the animation on tzedakah.
Because we'd love it. Oh, we'd love it.
But what I was going to say is that, one of the things, my script on tzedakah begins with this New York Times article where, there's a woman who is, she has a 3-year-old son who now she did not detect, she is very poor from Appalachia, and she did not detect that he has hearing loss. And now that it's been treated, he has now, can't speak very well, and he's like behind in school. And people started judging the mother because she was covered in tattoos, and they're like, well, you're covered in tattoos, why didn't you take care of your son? And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because a lot of these things have to do with judgment, right? Meaning we're judging the person who wronged us. For example, the man who is judging his father for abandoning his family and squandering his savings and gambling and all of these things. But one of the things that I learned from my teachers, again, all of this stuff that I'm saying isn't coming from me. I learned it from my teachers. I'm just passing it on. But one of the things that my teacher said about judgment, and I think this is very profound, and this also applies to self-judgment, because in Yom Kippur, we're looking at ourselves. We're internally looking at ourselves and evaluating what happened, where did I miss the mark? And one of the things about judgment is that judgment is really blindness. That's what she said. She said judgment is blindness.
Isn't that
And
interesting?
it's not only blindness about the person we are judging, but it's also blindness of ourselves. So here's what she said, for example, she said that maybe the woman who is getting tattoos, maybe that's the only way the woman ever learned to receive love or recognition, right? Maybe that woman grew up in an environment where the only way anybody would pay attention to her or see her as valuable is if she got a tattoo. And that's the way that she gets love. And in terms of us judging her, my teacher was saying, my kids just started school and I went to them to the mall because they had to get a new outfit. But do they really need a new outfit? They don't have to have a new outfit, but we've convinced ourselves they need a new outfit for school. So I bought all of my 6 kids a new outfit for school and everybody got new outfits. And now I have pressure because I have to work harder to pay the credit card bill for those outfits. And I'm seeing my kids less because I'm working hard. So maybe before I judge her, maybe I need to look at my own life. The Baal Shem Tov said that God made people as mirrors. The faults that we see in other people are actually our own. So that every time we judge someone, it gives us an opportunity to look at ourselves. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because, maybe what that boy needs to do, in addition to pay for his father's funeral so that he can just, put it aside, maybe what would also be helpful is to look at maybe what his father's upbringing or background was. My father in the animations is not my real father. It sounds like my father. I impersonate his voice and I drew him to look like my father and he has the mannerisms of my father. But my father wasn't teaching me Judaism, and my father was, I'm sorry to say, not the best father and not the best husband, right? But I looked deeply into my father's background, and I determined that my father did the best that he could with the upbringing that he had. And sometimes it helps to say, even people that we despise, if there's a politician who we're judging and we're saying, well, the politician is lying. Well, one way I can say to myself is I can say, well, I might not like the lie. I might not appreciate it. I might still be very angry, but I might say, maybe that politician grew up in a household where the only way that he could receive love is to win at all costs, whether he lied, whether he cheated or he stole, that's the way he would get love from his father. So it's just, before we judge, maybe we should say judgment is blindness and we need to look deeper. And this is, by the way, teachings of Rabbi Nachman.
I heard something interesting about alcoholism. I can't remember where I heard it, but it was recently. They go, they say, drug addiction and alcoholism, substance abuse causes mental illness. And whoever was speaking about it said, no, usually it's mental illness, an emotional disturbance that leads to substance abuse. So when you're judging the person, you go, you should keep that in mind.
Yes.
You should keep that in mind. I see our trusted referee here, our timekeeper.
Yes. So I just wanted to, before we move on to the service portion of the program tonight, mirror back to you some of the comments we've had from folks. Ginger said that the daddy is so funny in the animation.
Yes.
And Paula says, Hanan is so talented. Love the animation and his comments. And Sheila says, we love he is living in your head rent free.
Oh, can I mention something about that comment?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about alcoholism. This is just a very brief, but very important. So one of the big teachers in the animation is Rabbi Abraham Twersky, who comes from a long lineage of famous rabbis. He's like very observant, long beard, everything, Rabbi Twersky. But he also became a medical doctor and became a psychiatrist. And he founded a clinic in Pittsburgh, a rehabilitation clinic that's very world-renowned for people who suffer from addiction, alcoholism and other addictions. It's called the Gateway Rehabilitation Clinic. Now, Rabbi Twersky, even though he is not an alcoholic, he goes to the AA meetings at his rehabilitation clinic. Why? Even though he's not an alcoholic, because he sees the 12-step program as a representation of tshuva, to returning, this looking in yourself and returning to your best self. He sees the 12-step program as a form of tshuva. And it was actually, I went to Abraham Tversky and I says, everyone's loving your line, living in your head rent free. Everyone's loving the line because it's in his book, Living in Your Head Rent Free. He says, that's not my line. I heard it from a guy named John at an AA meeting in my rehabilitation clinic. And it was a guy who wasn't even Jewish. And he said, it's living in my head rent free. He's like, that's a great representation. He put it in his book. So that line that everybody loves is from a guy named John at an AA meeting. That's from Rabbi.
Yeah, but we quote you, Hanan. We quote you.
But you quote me. I'll take credit for it.
You're humble. What other comments do you have? Do you have any others that you would like to share with us? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Thank you, Rabbi. I personally, I think there's so much to unpack here with all of your shorts. But I'm also curious about technically how you created the animation. If you could just for like a 1-minute synopsis.
Yeah, of course. So what happens is that I first research the script for many months. Then I write the script. Then I read the script to all these different rabbis to see if it's kosher. And then I also read it to very non-observant people to hear if it sounds preachy, because the key is to make it sound not preachy, but still have the chokhmah, the wisdom in it. And then the animation process, I basically use a program called Flash, which is a 2D animation program, but I wanted it to look like German Expressionism, which is a very kind of raw feel. So I basically used several other software programs to create these paintbrushes to make these very kind of raw looking marks. And I have a series of hundreds of expressions of Hanan, facial expressions, because the key is really in the facial expressions.
Yes.
And then the process of animating is, of course, extremely time intensive. And it's all funded by the Covenant Foundation. And it's all free on YouTube and on my website, hananharchol.com, as well as my feature film, which is about my teaching as a public school.
Is it true that thinning is just the beginning?
I'm balding on the top. I don't know if you can see that. and somehow it stopped for some reason. But
okay.
Or it slowed down. But I always ask my 4-year-old son, is daddy's bald spot getting bigger? And some days he says yes, and some days he says no. Luckily, he doesn't judge me based on my hair.
Okay.
Well, and I just wanted to add really quickly before we begin this portion of the program that I did put the URL for your website, Hanan, in the comments. People can go see your shorts there and learn about your movie. And there's also study guides for each of the shorts that you can do on your own.
Rachel, the study guides are really important. The study guide for landlord forgiveness is very short, but the study guide, for example, on the animation on judging others favorably is a 15-page study guide. And the reason the study guides are important is because it shows that the wisdom actually comes from Jewish texts. And if you really want to experience the Chokhmah, like deeply reading the Jewish text, like now we're going to go through a service. When you go through, when you hear even the Jewish text, when you hear the cantor singing it, when you hear the Hebrew, when you read the source texts, that's where the root is of the wisdom. So I highly encourage people to look at the study guides.
Yeah, there's something. God isn't a popular subject these days. I think thoughtful young people have a problem with God, and I listen to their problem, the problem they have with God, and they go, yeah, I guess I have the same problem with God that you have. But I always tell them, don't throw Judaism out, because Judaism, is a product not of God really. I mean, God, there's inspiration. People talk about God, but it's a product of the Jewish people. And, you can have your doubts about God, and we all do. I'm sorry, I'm a religious guy. Sometimes I have my doubts about God. But there's such wisdom and such genius in we are a civilization, as the Reconstructionist Jews said. And it's such a rich humanistic, not just a theistic, but a humanistic tradition. And Don't, even if you have doubts about God, study a little Talmud, study some Chassidut, study, study the text, because they're so beautiful, so full of wisdom. So shall we begin, Cantor?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm going to light the candle.
Okay, you know what? I'll begin the way we always do with Havdalah, where we'll sing a little melody, then we'll put the words to the prayers. All right? So everyone can sing along. It's easy. It goes like this: Light, 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 light. Sing along at home. Light, 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 light. Light, 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 light. Light, 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 light. Light, 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 light. Light, 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 light. Light, 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 light. Light, 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 light. Inhale, Yeshuati. Evtach velo evkad. Ki azi v'zimra Yadonai. Vayehi li shuha. Shavtem hayim bisason. Mimayene ha-Yeshua. Ladonai ha-Yeshua. Alamcha birchatecha selah. Adonai tzvaot imanu mishkav lanu Elohei Yaakov selah. Adonai tzvaot ashrei adam boteach bak. Adonai Hoshea HaMelech Yaneinu V'yom Kareinu LaYehudim Hayita Hora V'simcha v'sason v'ikar Ken tiyeh lanu Kos Yeshuot esa U'v'shem Adonai ekra Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam B'orei peri hagafen.
Amen.
I got some here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam B'orei mini v'samim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam B'orei me'orei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hamavdil ben kodesh lekol Beino lechoshech ben Yisrael la'amim ben yom hashevi l'sheishet yemei hamahaseh. Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lekol. Eliyahu Eliyahu hatishbi Eliyahu 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 agiladi bimera v'yamenu yavo eleinu Mashiach ben David Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi. Amabedil Amahadil Ben Kodesh Lekol. Chatotenu Yimkol. Zarenu Bechasbenu Yad Bekakol. Bekakol Chavim Balayla. Everybody. Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov.
God does not want to be believed in, to be debated and defended by us, but simply realized through us. We begin our Selichot service. Now is the time for turning. The leaves, at least up north, are beginning to turn from green to red and orange. The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more toward the south. The animals are beginning to turn to storing their food for the winter. For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively, but for us, turning does not come so easily. It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking with old habits. It means admitting when we have been wrong, and this is never easy. It means losing face. It means starting all over again, and this is always painful. It means saying, I am sorry. It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are terribly hard to do, but unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways. Lord, help us to turn from callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment, from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith. Turn us around, O Lord, and bring us back toward you. Revive our lives as at the beginning. And turn us toward each other, Lord, for in isolation there is no life. We continue on page 24, Cantor Hashivenu.
Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh yameinu kekedem.
Eternal God, what can we say in your presence? How account for our sins? We speak of repentance and yet are slow to change. But now we turn to you with the prayer that your love may abide with us always, turning our hearts to your ways, our feet to your paths. Hope is food and drink to us. Hope sustains us. And so we pray, do not turn us away empty-handed from your presence. End our darkness with your light and turn our passions to your purpose. Help us, Lord, in this hour of turning to make real in our lives the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts. Page 26, Cantor, Shomer Yisrael.
Shomer, Shomer Yisrael, Shmo Sherid Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael, Shmo Sherid Yisrael. V'al Yovad, V'al Yovad Yisrael, V'al Yovad, V'al Yovad Yisrael, HaOmrim, HaOmrim Shema Yisrael. V'al Yovad, V'al Yovad Yisrael, V'al Yovad, V'al Yovad Yisrael, HaOmrim, HaOmrim, HaOmrim Shema Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer Goy Echad, Shmo Sheritam Echad. Shomer, Shomer Goy Echad, Shmo Sheritam Echad. V'al Yovad, V'al Yovad Goy Echad, V'al Yovad, V'al Yovad Goy Echad, Am Yachadim, Am Yakadim Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Lord our God and God of all generations, help us to overcome the impulse to do evil. You have created us able to do your will, but in our nature, there is a wayward spirit that hinders us and keeps us from doing what we should. O Lord our God, help us to subdue it so that we may, with a whole heart, make your will our own. Once more on page 39, Hashivenu. Cantor?
Page 39. Ashivenu Adonai lecha v'nashuva Chadesh yameinu kekedem.
And now on page 41. Our God and God of our mothers and fathers, grant that our prayers may reach you. Do not be deaf to our pleas, for we are not so arrogant and stiff-necked as to say before you, Lord our God and God of all ages, we are perfect and have not sinned. Rather, do we confess, we have gone astray, we have sinned, we have transgressed. The Ashamnu, this is kind of a warm-up for the high holidays. We tap our hearts as Hanan was showing us how he and his mom would do on Yom Kippur when he was a young boy. Ashamnu, it's an alphabet starting. It starts with Aleph and it goes all the way to Tav. It's about all sorts of sins we may or may not have repented, or we may have committed.
Ay, ay, ay,
Ay, ay,
ay, ay, ay, ay, ay, Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazamnu, Dibanu Dofi. Ay, 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 Hevinu, Vehirshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafanu Shaker. Ay, 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 Yadatnu Rab, Kizavnu, Latsnu, Maradnu, Niatsnu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu Oref. Ay, 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 Rashanu, Shikatnu, Tiavnu, Tainu, Titanu.
Cantor on page 42. I will read the Hebrew, and if you would lead us in the English, that would be good.
Sure.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha ba'ones uvratzon.
The sin we have committed against you under duress or by choice.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bezadon uvishkaga.
The sin we have committed against you consciously or unconsciously.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha begalui uvasater.
And the sin we have committed against you openly or secretly.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha besinat chinam.
The sin we have committed against you by hating without cause.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'masa uvmatan.
The sin we have committed against you by dishonesty in business.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'hona'at re'ah.
And the sin we have committed against you by hurting others in any way.
For all these,
Go ahead. Yeah.
For all these, O God of mercy, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
V'al kulam Elohas slichot selach lanu mechalanu kapelanu.
Let's do the next bit in English. How about I read and you respond, Cantor? We have sinned against life by failing to work for peace.
We have sinned against life by keeping silent in the face of injustice.
We have sinned against life by ignoring those who suffer in distant lands.
We have sinned against life by forgetting the poor in our own midst.
We have failed to respect those made in the image of God.
We have withheld our love from those who depend on us.
We have engaged in gossip and in repeated slander.
We have distorted the truth for our own advantage.
We have conformed to fashion and not to conscience.
We have indulged in despair and trafficked with cynics.
We have given meager support to our houses of study.
We have neglected our heritage of learning.
We have sinned against ourselves and paid scant heed to the life of the Spirit.
We have sinned against ourselves and have not risen to fulfill the best that is in us.
For all these, O God of mercy, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
V'al kulam Elohas slichot selach lanu mechalanu kapelanu.
Keep me, O God, from bad intentions and from excessive pride. Help me at all times to govern my passions and master my inclinations. Against melancholy and bitterness, defend my soul. Guard my tongue against slander and deceit, and open my eyes to the virtues of others. Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu v'hanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu v'hanenu, Ki ein banu ma'asim, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed,
V'hoshir.
Avinu Malkeinu.
We rise. I'm going to open up the ark. We pray for compassion and plead for grace. O God, our help, favor us and grant us peace. Our Father, our King, be gracious and answer us, even when we have little merit. Treat us generously and with kindness, and be our help. Uncertain of our ways, we look to you. Remember your compassion and your steadfast love, O Lord, for they are eternal. Lord, for you alone we wait in hope. Extend to us your grace. Let not past errors be held against us, and when our own merits are few, let your compassion be quick to meet us. Be gracious, Lord, and be gracious to us. Our cup of sorrows is full. Behold us with compassion. Remember how we were made. Remember that we are but dust. God, our help, as your nature is your glory, save us. Help us atone for our sins, that your will may prevail. Cantor Hashivenu.
Hashivenu Adonai lecha v'nashuva, Kadesh Yameinu, Kekedem, Tekiah Gidolah.
And now we can officially start greeting each other with the words, Lashana Tova Tikatevu. May you be inscribed for a good, sweet, prosperous, and happy New Year. Hanan, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are grateful for your teaching, and you are a delightful teacher, and we learned so much from you tonight. And whoever wasn't a fan is now a fan of yours. Well, and good luck in all your endeavors.
I wanted to say how much I enjoyed the service. It's so beautiful. And Cantor, you sang so beautifully. I felt the resonance of your voice through the computer screen. It's just so lovely. And I hope we get to meet again. And hopefully this horrible virus is past us soon. And thank you again for having me. It's such a privilege. Shana Tova, Gmar Chatima Tova. Thank you so much.
Okay, and to everyone who's tuned in, we'll see you soon. We'll see you Friday night, if not before. I'm doing meditations or during the week. And Friday, 7:30, join us for our online Rosh Hashanah service, and of course Saturday, and stand by for all sorts of good things. Oh, we have yoga on Monday morning. Online yoga with Jenna Hoffman, 11 o'clock.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Hanan. Thank you, Rachel. What would we do without Rachel?
What would we do?